Oh, by the way, you can open and close these little side windows by double clicking on the little center bar there. You see that little clicker there? So if you wanted more real estate to edit, you can close that window if you're not using it, and then double click it. It's on the very outside of your screen. In this case, it's a little thin brown line. And that's on the left-hand side as well. And you can see on my left-hand side, I've got two different things that I keep open. One is the audio monitor, which is basically a meter bridge. And you can open up a separate second meter bridge on another window if you want. Up under Studio, you can go down to meter bridge. It's also Shift Z will open and close a second meter bridge, which I keep over on another screen by my mixing console so that I don't have to look over at this screen when I'm tracking. I can just glance up and see my meter bridge. You can pull that out of this lock mode here and put that on any screen you want. It's kind of a handy feature to be able to pull things out of the window and put them on separate screens. Of course, resize it however you want. The meter bridge is something that's really nice to have, and you can resize it. You can totally adjust the different windows and how many you can see inputs, outputs. I don't want to go too far into this, but if you bring that open, you can have all your different instruments, tracks, bundles, everything right there, which is crazy, I know. But I usually just have to look at, I like to look at the inputs, and I don't need to see it very big at all, just to see if I'm got a good signal coming in, or if I'm clipping, it'll show you a red clip on the top and hold that. So if you're setting up drums and you see a red clipping thing on a channel, you know to bring that back down. But I'll put that over on another screen, way over there on the other side, and keep that handy while I'm tracking over by the mixing board, because that's where I'm setting up the levels over there. I'm not doing that at the DAW. And then also on the left-hand side, I'm looking at my track selector. This is just a simple place where you can turn on or off instruments or tracks that you don't want to see. I could, for example, I could turn off my whole drum group there. If I'm done with drums and I don't want to see that, and just I'm focusing on guitars, I could turn off my drums. They're still there, don't worry, but you can just turn them on and off in your view. It's not erasing them or anything like that. It's just your overview. So that's an easy and quick way I can go through and hide or show tracks. What I typically do is hop back and forth between two different windows, my mixing board and my tracks. Sometimes I'll go over to my tracks overview. If you're copying and pasting entire choruses, this is a very nice place to do that, because you can see the bars, the measures up above. You can go through and count and select 4 bars or 8 bars really quickly. One section or an entire, you can take an entire chorus of the band, copy that, paste it elsewhere. If you're recording with a metronome click, that's a really nice way to build up a song. It works very well. And you have the advantage of being able to overview different measures, which you don't have that ability as well in the, you can do it in the sequence window. It's just a little easier to do it in the tracks overview window. But usually I'm going to stay between the sequence and the mixing board. Sometimes that happens if your tracks go away. Just go over here under the track selector. There's a little mini menu, and hit show tracks all, and they'll come back. It's a little glitch I've noticed. Sometimes the faders go away. If they do that, just reselect them there. Show tracks all, and they'll pop back. Cleaning up tracks is something I do a lot. I spend a lot of time doing it. When you're looking at a track, you might want to take off count offs and things like that. You can do that very effectively here. Like this is my kick drum, for example. I can take off the beginning of that, so it's the first kick is the first thing I hear when that first comes in. So I clean up tracks right there. I'll go through and clean up all my intros so that the first time the snare hits, I'm not hearing anything before that. No rumble or count offs or anything like that. No room noise. Same with my snare bottom. I'll go through and clean up the beginning of my songs right there, so you're not hearing those count offs. You might want to leave your count offs for a while until all the band's done tracking. Obviously, the musicians might need to hear that count off to start the song. But when you're done tracking all your musicians, go ahead and clean up your beginnings, your heads, like that. I'm just clicking, dragging, selecting, and hitting delete. You can clean up all your tracks like that. Also, at the end of your songs, do the same thing. You want to look at the from the top down. You want to see where your last kick drum hit is. Boom. Boom, boom. Looks like right there. So you could take off the ends of your song. So leave a little breathing room for things like cymbals ringing out. Usually your kick drums, you can pretty much clean them up right there. There's my snare bottom. There's nothing after that, so I can take that off. This is just the end of your songs. You can do them in groups as well. If you've got a bunch of them, you can go in there like that and clean that up. Cymbals are a little bit different. You want to let your cymbals ring out, especially the overheads. So what you can do is clean them up, but put a nice fade on them. The easiest way to do this, select the section that you want to fade and then put a fade on that. I've assigned a key on my keyboard to create fades. Instead of going into my menu and creating a fade, I've assigned a key that I don't use very often, and I just press that and it'll assign a fade. And then I can adjust the shape of the fade and hit OK. And you can see it put a nice fade on the stereo, the two overheads for the drums right there. And of course you can go back in and adjust that fade later if you need. If you wanted a bigger fade like that, you can do that. Double click. And there's a nice fade out on the drums, on the overhead cymbals, I mean. So yeah, take the time to do that. Clean up your beginnings and your endings. It's a good idea when you've got them edited like you want, instead of just having a cut like that, to go ahead and put on a little mini fade on those, just so that this, there you go. It's as easy as that, just so the tracks taper off. Once you've got everything cleaned up at the beginning and the end, one thing that I want to do is go ahead and clean up my tom-toms. What I used to do in the past is use noise gate to clean up the tom-toms. Obviously, when you have 3 microphones on your tom-toms, and they're picking up tom-tom fills, but most of the time they're just picking up the rest of the drum kit when the tom-toms aren't being played. And that's going to add a lot of what I call garbage or useless information to your track. So you want to go through and clean up those tom-toms so that you're only hearing the tom-toms when they're being struck, and then silence for the rest of the time. So sometimes a drummer might do 1 or 2 or 3 fills using the tom-toms during a song, and the rest of it's just 90% of it, 95% of it is just the mics are open picking up the other drums, and that's going to mush up your mix quite a bit. So in the past, what engineers would do is go ahead and use noise gate on each of those tom-tom microphones, so the noise gate opened up and let the tom-tom through when it was hit, and then would close when it was not, and keep that mush out of that mix. The thing about noise gates is you have to adjust them very carefully, and they're a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes they'll cut off pieces of the tom-tom that you don't want. So I got away from using noise gates. I found that the amount of time that I was spending setting up noise gates, it took just as much time for me to do that as it did for me to go through and do what I call hand trimming those tom-tom tracks. Usually you've only got 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 tracks of tom-toms. So what I'll do is just take the 10 or 15 minutes to go through and solo those tom-toms, just so I'm not hearing any other instruments, let the track play through, and then I can hear and see. What I'm watching out for is when he plays those tom-toms, which is, in this case, you can see there's very little tom-tom activity. As a matter of fact, he doesn't hit one until right there. There's the first time, which is 2 minutes into the song, he's hitting a little tom-tom fill. And it's just on one tom-tom. It's not on all 3 of them. So what I'll do is go through and highlight those. You can see the tom-tom very clearly, and separate those. You want to do what's called a split. It's going to split that audio off. You can do a Command Y, is the power command for that. Command Y will split that into separate audio. And I'm not going to do anything right now except go through this song, and you can either hit play and just watch, or you can kind of scroll through. He didn't do much at all, as you can see here. So there's another one. You get the tom-tom again. So I select that. Oh, by the way, you want to turn off your grid lock here too. That's gonna, that little thing right there is gonna turn your grid on or off. I actually assign a key to that also. My little asterisk on the outside here is a key that I use to turn that grid on or off. So you go through and you select that little tom-tom, and you don't want to select the next hit, so you can just select a little bit before and right up to the next thing, which is probably a hi-hat. Command Y, and keep on going. Go through your entire song. There's one at the end. So in the entire song, he hit the first rack tom 3 times. And I've split all 3 of those off. Obviously, there's usually more tom-tom fills than that, so you'd have to go through on all 3 tracks and do that. Typically, drummers are going to do a tom-tom fill using 2 or 3 of the tom-toms, so you might have to go through and do that on track the tom-tom 1, then select the track on 2 and 3, and basically just go through and highlight and separate all of those tracks, and I'll show you why here. What we're going to do now, once you're very sure that you've gotten all your tom-toms selected and you're not missing anything, you can see, if I zoom out, that there they are. There's 1, 2, and 3 little tom-tom hits. The rest is just mush. It's just garbage, so we want to get rid of it. So what you can do is just select, or you can shift select, boom, boom, all the areas that you want to delete, which is 99% of it. You can delete it like that and leave just the tom-toms. Or if you're unsure, you can use this little X here, which is the mute tool. Select that, and you can just go through and mute them instead of deleting them. And that turns them gray, and then switch back to your cursor. I love the mute tool. It's one of the best little features. Clicking that in the cursor is something I do a lot. It's a powerful tool, so if you want to erase something without actually erasing it, you just mute it instead, so you can come back to it. Once you've deleted them, they're still on your hard disk, but it's a little trickier to drag them back and restore them. So if somebody decided they wanted something that you had deleted, it's a lot easier just to unmute it. You see? So that's your little mute tool up there. Once you've gotten through, in this case, I'm very sure that I'm going to not need to see them anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them. And then you've got just your 3 tom-toms left. And it's getting rid of all that mushy mess that you don't need. Hand trimming the tom-toms. Most engineers will do this. I'm sure everybody has their different methods, but that's the basic gist of it. It's not a very exciting task. It's kind of housekeeping, but you've got great sounding drums without all that drum mush that we talked about. You could leave them like that if you wanted to. Let me zoom in on one of those tom-toms a little bit. It would be fine to leave it like that. The problem is that when that tom-tom, it's gonna come in a little bit abruptly. So what I like to do is take an extra moment to just draw a little fade on the beginning, and you can also do a little taper on it. So you're basically kind of trimming the beat so it's not chopping in and chopping out with a butt cut. You're fading in. You don't want to fade in too far, otherwise it's going to take away the attack of the tom-tom. That's not your goal at all. You want to leave the attack of the tom-tom, but you just want to fade up to the point where it hits the drum. And then the same on the outboard, the tail of the drum where it's tapering off, you could fade that out as well. So it's more of a gentle, it's kind of a gentle gate is the way I think about it. A gate's just going to open up and shut off kind of abruptly. You can adjust that a little bit on the gate, but I really prefer doing it this way because you can actually see and adjust them there. You could do that another way too. What you could do is zoom out, and select all of your tom-toms, and then apply a fade to all of them at once. Boom. And then if you'll go back in and look at your tom-toms, you've applied a fade to all of them instead of doing them individually. Let's look at my second one there. The problem with that is you're probably going to have to adjust them anyway. You want to get that so you can see my bulk fade cut into that second one. So sometimes it's just as easy to go through and do them individually. But if you've got a lot of tom-toms going on, you might go ahead and set your fade up so you can apply it to all of your tom-tom hits. Might save some time that way, but you should go in and spot check them just the same. Make sure that you're not cutting into the attack of the tom-tom. Otherwise, it's going to lose its punch and you've defeated the purpose. So that's a little trick I like to use, adjusting those fades on the tom-toms. You can do these on snares as well. The problem with kicks and snares is that there's a lot more of them. So if you were to take the time to do this on every single snare, you'd be there all day. So you're probably going to be better off with if you wanted to gate your snare using a plug-in. It's going to save you a lot of time to spend the energy detailing the snare drum gate. And so that's going to open and close every time that snare drum is hit. You could do that on the tom-toms as well, but like I said, I like doing it this way. Yeah, so I've cleaned up my beginnings, my endings. I've hand trimmed my tom-toms like a fine piece of beef. I can taper my endings on my cymbals if I want. That pretty much covers the heavy lifting of the editing. Doesn't take too much time. The thing that takes up the most time is going to be those tom-toms, but highly worth doing that. Let's jump over to my mixing board here now that I've showed you how to clean up your audio tracks. Here I'm going to go over some of the ways that I like to use some of my favorite plugins to process the drums. Now what I've done here, and I've discussed this in another video about setting up your template, what I've got here at the very top, it's easy to overlook them, but these little slots at the very top above your plugin slots, which is what these guys are, is presets. Basically, these are user presets that you can define so that every time you are ready to mix, you go up and go in on the channel. Like in this one, it's my kick drum inside mic, and I've got that set up. So you go down and it's got a little check on it. You can go down and click that and it'll pop up the plugins that you prefer using on that channel. And in my template, I've gone through and I've done that on all of my channels, my drums, my guitars, my vocals, establishing my preferred plugins on that particular channel or instrument. If you leave them on your track, it's going to eat into your RAM. So you don't want to leave them just always sitting on your channel. I find this way you can set up whatever plugins you want, as many as you want, and then save them as a preset. And then you go through and delete them and save that as your template. That way, if you decide you don't want to use your usual plugins, you can load a different plugin. But I always find that my presets are my go-tos. So I'll go through there and select them and pop. They're open, and I can open them up right away. And I am ready to start working on that instrument. I've got them popped over to another screen, so I'm going to slide them up here. But in this particular case, I'm using, these are the two plugins that I prefer on my kick drum, at least on the inside mic. You don't even have to have them bypassed. If you had them stored on your desktop like that in a bypass state, you'd have to turn off bypass every time to avoid using up your RAM. So this way, you don't have to worry about bypassing them. Like I said, I just click there, go down to the instrument, and they have a little check mark right there next to it, and boom, there they are. Then they're active right away, even if you don't open them. They're not bypassed. They're already ready to go, and then you can open them if you want to adjust them, obviously. On my kick, I've got one of my favorite compressors. It's the Empirical Labs Distressor from United Audio. It's a great plug-in. If you had one compressor on a desert island, this is the one that I would probably go for. And believe me, I love my vintage compressors as well. My 1176s, my DBX compressor. I love my Teletronics LA2A compressor. Those are all my favorites. But this Distressor is designed to emulate all of those. You can set this up in so many different ways, from a gentle, optical, old-style sort of compression to a modern, fast, punchy compression, more like a DBX or an 1176. So I highly recommend this plug-in, and take the time to really read the manual on it to understand. It's kind of a beast. It's a Swiss Army knife of plugins, so take the time to read through the manual and really understand all of these different settings. Once you've done that, it's actually not very complicated, but when you first look at it, it's like, what is all this stuff? Links and detectors and distortions, and it looks complicated, but once you understand it, it's really not. It can do really great things on it can do great things on anything, but I really like it on drums. Down below, I've got one of my preferred EQs. Mark of the Unicorn, as most DAWs do, comes with its own basic EQ. Mark of the Unicorn has actually a pretty nice one here I can show you. It's actually quite brilliant. It emulates an older type of EQ found on consoles, so you can do a lot without purchasing any plugins as well. That's a really nice EQ for free. But I've invested in a couple of more vintage compressors, and also this SSL EQ I just like it a little bit better than I do the included version. But that's probably because it doesn't have any sort of a visual representation. You can see here when you make adjustments, obviously the adjustments are reflected with a visual reference. And sometimes that's nice, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes I don't want to see what I'm doing. I just want to use my ears. So that's what I like about the SSL. Besides the fact that the SSL EQ is a great sounding EQ. It just sounds very musical. This is a Waves plugin, actually, that you can get from other companies as well. But the Waves plugin is really nice. They have channel strips and stuff that have the built-in compression and noise gates and all that. But this is just their simplified EQ. I believe it's from a G series console. That's actually got a nice filter, as well as you can turn the analog emulation on or off. I like it because you're not using your eyes. You're listening and just turning knobs, more like you would on a mixing console. Mixing consoles don't have at least the old ones don't have a built-in visual display of what you're doing. Sometimes when you see a EQ curve going way up or way down, it feels like a lot, but when you're not worried about that, I just like being able to turn the knob and not being too worried about whether it looks funny or not. I just want to hear if it sounds good to me. That's what I want to do.